It's no longer news that Jon Jones made quick work of Ciryl Gane and claimed the UFC Heavyweight Championship. However, there are several amazing aspects to Jones' win. The first is the fact that he has been out of action for 3 years. So to come back, shake off ring rust, and win the title in his first match speaks volumes of greatness about the American fighter. Another thing that makes the Jones vs. Gane fight so memorable is the speed with which Jones ended the fight. All it took for him to force Gane to tap was a mere 2 minutes and 4 seconds into the first round. That has to be one of the quickest comeback wins in the UFC's history. And that's another clear-cut reason why Jones is so great. But it's not like his opponent was a pushover. Far from it. Ciryl Gane has a reputation for being one of the toughest heavyweights in the division. This was by no means a walk in the park for Jones, at least not on paper. Without a doubt, the bout was one of the toughest tests of the former welterweight champion's career. But Jones has learned that with great risk comes great reward, and he cashed in on that maxim repeatedly. He has a total of 26 wins and 1 loss by disqualification, and is widely considered to be one of the best MMA fighters of all time. In an interview with RMC Sport, Jones, who has now become the UFC heavyweight champion, gave his take on the top 5 greatest MMA fighters of all time. Jones has always had a reputation of being too confident, which is why it came as no surprise when he threw himself into the list first. Although he was kind enough to mention 4 other talented fighters among the greatest. And surprisingly, it included one of his former foes. And no, it's not Daniel Cormier, but we'll get to that later. First on Jones' list is none other than Georges St. Pierre, and I doubt anyone would disagree. After victories in November 2006 and April 2008, St. Pierre became a 3-time UFC welterweight champion. To his credit, St. Pierre held the #1 spot in the welterweight rankings on SureDog and other websites for an extended period of time. Rogers Sportsnet even honored him as Canadian Athlete of the Year in 2008, 2009, and 2010. That's 3 years straight, and that says a lot about how talented he is. According to Fight Matrix, Georges St. Pierre is the greatest fighter in mixed martial arts history and the best welterweight in the sport's history. In December of 2013, he retired from the UFC as the welterweight champion after having successfully defended his title 9 times in a row. Yes, 9 times in a row. During that time, he set records for most wins in title bouts and longest combined title streak in UFC history. His championship streak lasted for an amazing 2,204 days. Back in the octagon in November of 2017, he fought Michael Bisping and won via submission to claim the middleweight title. This made him only the 4th fighter in UFC history to hold titles in 2 different weight classes. A few weeks later, he retired from mixed martial arts and gave up the title, citing health concerns as the reason behind his decision. Jose Aldo is another fighter that Jon Jones considers to be among the greatest of all time. In fact, Jones isn't the only one who feels this way, as Aldo is widely considered to be the best mixed martial artist of all time by many MMA blogs and journalists too. This might sound strange to younger MMA fans though, as they probably weren't into the sport when Aldo was at his peak. Nonetheless, once the UFC and WEC merged, Jose Aldo became the promotion's inaugural featherweight champion. After successfully defending his UFC title 7 times and his WEC title twice, Aldo is widely regarded as the greatest featherweight ever. Named the 2009 Fighter of the Year on SureDog.com, Aldo was dubbed the greatest featherweight in MMA history in SureDog's April 2017 pound-for-pound rating. He suffered his first mixed martial arts loss in November 2005, but followed up by going on an incredible 18-fight winning streak before finally losing to Conor McGregor at UFC 194 in December 2015. Speaking of Conor McGregor, he was snubbed on Jon Jones' list of top 5 greatest MMA fighters of all time. Although one should not conclude that Jones doesn't believe McGregor to be a great fighter, we we all know he is, but in comparison to the others on his list, he probably wasn't good enough to squeeze into the top 5, at least not in Jon Jones' opinion anyway. But one man that was definitely good enough to be on Jones' greatest ever list is none other than Anderson Silva. In case you didn't know, Silva's UFC title reign is the longest in the organization's history at 2,457 days. This began in 2006 and lasted until 2013. During that time, he won a record 16 matches in a row in the UFC. Silva made his debut on June 28, 2006 at Ultimate Fight Night 5. Chris Lieben, a competitor from Season 1 of The Ultimate Fighter, was his opponent on the night. At the time, Lieben was 5-0 in the UFC, and in a pre-fight interview, he boasted that he would knock out Silva. Silva, a fighter who was at the time largely unknown in the United States, made a stunning debut by knocking out Lieben, and it took him only 49 seconds of the first round to do so. It was also that Silva had an 85% striking accuracy that night, which means that Lieben took a whole bunch of hard hits. After Silva's triumph, a poll asking fans to choose his next opponent was posted on the UFC's homepage, and the results were made public. Voters overwhelmingly chose middleweight champion Rich Franklin to face Silva next. And at UFC 64 on October 14, 2006, Silva fought Franklin and won via TKO in the first round in just 2 minutes 59 seconds. From the Muay Thai clinch, Silva delivered knees to Franklin's torso, and later he fractured Franklin's nose with a knee to the face. With no way to counter Silva's attacks, Franklin avoided them all before collapsing to the floor, where the fight was stopped by referee Big John McCarthy. Silva, who was fighting for the Black House Squad, defeated Franklin for the second time and was subsequently proclaimed UFC middleweight champion. UFC president Dana White, UFC announcer Joe Rogan, and a plethora of MMA experts have all praised Silva as one of the sport's all-time greats, echoing the sentiments of Jon Jones. Khabib Nurmagomedov comes in next, and he rounds up Jon Jones' list of the top 5 greatest mixed martial arts fighters of all time. Despite their history of conflict, current UFC heavyweight champion Jon Jones still had to pay his respects to the Russian fighter. Although they never met in the octagon, Jones and Khabib had a lot of ill will toward one another. Even so, it appears that the disagreement, if you can even call it that, has been resolved. According to Jones' assessment of Khabib, "I really admire what Khabib stands for. In the past, we've disagreed, and I've even made some remarks about him. Yet, there has never been any real beef." Khabib Nurmagomedov was the Ultimate Fighting Championship's longest reigning lightweight champion, having defended his championship for an unprecedented 20 months, from April 2018 to March 2021. And with an outstanding 29 victories and 0 defeats, he hung up his gloves and went into retirement. On June 30th, 2022, the UFC Hall of Fame officially inducted Khabib Nurmagomedov, and that is nothing less than he deserves.